Hi guys. So today I wanted to jump on here real quick to share my thoughts on this book I recently finished, Babel by Rebecca F. Kuang, or R.F. Kuang. Now I don't want this video to be an in-depth review of Babel per se. There are plenty of videos on YouTube for that. No, I just wanted to focus on one particular theme in Babel that really resonated with me. But first, I will say that overall as a novel, Babel is wonderfully crafted by R.F. Kuang. It's an easy 10 out of 10 for me. So I would highly recommend Babel if you are into fantasy, historical fiction, or dark academia type novels. Yeah, Babel's right up your alley. So, thumbs up from me. So what is this theme that I wanted to talk about today in Babel? Well, I should probably first give you a quick synopsis of the plot. So Babel follows the story of Robin, our main protagonist. He is taken away from his homeland of China at a young age and sent off to the British Empire to be trained and educated as a translator for the British Empire. This is all taking place in a fictional world set in the early 19th century, so the early 1800s in Britain. And what makes this into a fantasy novel is the magic that's involved. Specifically, silver. Silver in this world has the property where it can take the semantic gap or the difference in meaning between two words, and it can then manifest it as a physical effect on the world. Now, the two words have to be close in meaning, but slightly off. So as an example, if you were to take the word ode in English and inscribe it on a silver bar, and if you were to also take the Chinese character for ode, gu, and inscribe it also on the same silver bar, the silver would then try to manifest that difference in meaning between these two words or characters as some sort of physical effect on the world. So in this case, this Chinese character, gu, also means strength or durability, whereas old in English just basically means aged. So what that would mean then is if this silver bar were to be used on a piece of machinery, that machine would last far longer than it should. And if the machine were to be used over and over again, it would actually become more and more durable as a result, which kind of goes against intuition. Usually machines degrade over time, but that's the magic here of the silver working. All right. So with that out of the way, what is this theme that I've been alluding to? It's the theme of the power of language and translation. There's a very profound lesson in this novel, Babel, and it's this. Every act of translation is an act of betrayal. What does that mean? If you think about it, in every work of translation, the translator has to either make one of two choices. Either they choose to preserve the original meaning of the author and ignore the sensibilities of the modern reader, thereby betraying the modern reader, or they do the opposite. They choose to move the author towards the modern reader and frame the translation in such a way that the modern reader can understand easily, thereby betraying the original author, because they would then ignore or manipulate the semantics in such a way that maybe the original author did not intend. So every translation is essentially a lie in a way, or it involves some sort of sacrifice in meaning, right? Either you move the author towards the reader, or you move the reader towards the author. There's some betrayal happening. And the translator has to make that choice. Yeah, I've never actually considered translation in that light before until I read Babel. So thank you, Rebecca Kuang, for crafting such a wonderful story and teaching me that lesson. Because Translation actually plays a rather important role in my life, my personal life. Growing up, I used to translate for my parents from English to Cantonese, although I wasn't very good at it. My Cantonese was and is pretty terrible. But I would translate pieces of mail or phone conversations for them, and I'm sure other children of immigrant families can relate to those experiences. But thinking back on those memories now, I realized that what I was really doing is trying to connect two different worlds together to provide a sort of link between them, or a bridge. Because I was trying to make one world, my parents' world, communicate with the English-speaking world. And so what I want to leave you guys with today is some food for thought, which is this. Translation and translators by extension are so very important for our society. Because while yes, an act of translation is an act of betrayal, it is nonetheless an act of connection. It's a way of bridging all these gaps that exist in our world. Because without translators, fractures or misunderstandings can occur that may threaten to tear apart not only our personal lives, but also the world at large. So let me read you a quote from the novel that I find particularly thought-provoking. If I can locate the page. Oh yes, right over here. There's no spoilers here, so you can watch on without fear. So I quote, "For how could there ever be an Adamic language?" The thought now made him laugh. There was no innate, perfectly comprehensible language. There was no candidate, not English, not French, that could bully and absorb enough to become one. Language was just difference. A thousand different ways of seeing, of moving through the world. No, a thousand worlds within one. And translation, a necessary endeavor, however futile, to move between them. So we desperately need people who can definitely move between two different worlds or two different languages. People who are so fluent in both languages that they can dream in both languages. People like that are immeasurably valuable, I think, to our society. So if you're a translator out there, or if you are a multilingualist, thank you for your service. Keep being yourself, because you are helping to make the world a more familiar place for everyone. Because, like I mentioned in the previous video, we are all just a collection of stories waiting to be told. And if there's no one on the other side to listen or to understand us, well then we might be lost. And especially if the other person does not speak our language. And in those cases, we would definitely require the use of a translator. Because body language can only take you so far. It has certainly been a very well relied upon means of communication between me and various family members. And it has worked out pretty well for the most part, but there's always something missing, right? And actually that brings me to another thing I wanted to discuss really briefly, which is the limitations of tools like Google Translate, right? Google Translate, for all of its progress in the past decade or so, is still quite restricted or limited. It leaves something to be desired, because what makes a language is not just the words and the grammar and the syntax, but it's the cultural aspects behind those words and sentences and so on. It's the cultural meaning behind those words. And when we just translate a sentence literally using Google Translate, we are leaving out all of that baggage, or maybe not baggage, but all of that semantic meaning, all that cultural meaning. And so if we use Google Translate to translate a sentence from one language to another, we lose out on that cultural aspect of the sentence or phrase. Google Translate fails to capture the cultural meaning behind that word or that sentence. And so there's still work to be done on that front, which again emphasizes just the need for fluent translators, because Google Translate ain't cutting it. In any case, the Duolingo owl is beckoning to me right now, so I must heed its call. So with that, I would like to thank you for watching, and if you enjoyed our discussion today of languages and translation, please consider liking and subscribing down below. I would greatly appreciate it. And as always, stay sharp out there, and perhaps go learn a language. Yeah, that's what I'll be doing right now. I really hope we never have a shortage of translators in the world. Although I think we might actually, with like over, 7,000 languages in use today. There might be a shortage of translators for certain pairs of languages. Anyway, my point is that we desperately need to be able to connect with our fellow people. Translation is one way we can do that.